Hello, my name is Ethan Park, and I am presenting my Intersections of Me TED Talk. According to Kimberly Crenshaw in her piece Mapping the Margins, Intersectionality, Identity Politics, and Violence Against Women of Color, published in the Stanford Law Review, intersectionality is the way in which gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, class, and other forms of discrimination intersect to create unique dynamics and effects. As a result of my intersections, I'm a white male, and because of that, I am a beneficiary of white privilege. This privilege leads to increased opportunities, access to representation, feelings of security within everyday life, and racial ignorance. Being a white man automatically means that I benefit from power structures created by and for white people. My whiteness also predisposes me to generational resources gained largely by the exploitation of these white-centric power structures. In his book, Understanding White Privilege, Creating Pathways to Authentic Relationships Across Race, published in 2011, Francis E. Kendall describes white privilege, where in society we see it most prevalent, and why it exists. In an excerpt from his book, Kendall describes race and its involvement in the workforce. He explains that white men constitute about 43% of the workforce and hold 95% of senior management positions in American industry, while Black women hold 5% and Black men hold 4%. Unless you believe white people are inherently more able leaders, then there is a systemic issue at play. The framework of America was created with people who look like me in mind, and will continue to serve those disproportionately unless change is made. There are people that look like me in all facets of life. I am always represented and validated. Validation comes from representation, and minorities tend to lack that representation and in turn can lack validation. Peggy McIntosh, in her 1989 scholarly article, White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack, published in Independent School, describes white privilege and how we can attempt to lessen its impacts by realizing its existence. She states that as a white person, she can easily buy postcards, posters, picture books, greeting cards, dolls, toys, and children's magazines featuring people of her race. For people, especially women of color, this is not the case. As an example, in the US Supreme Court's 233-year history, the first female African American justice, Ketanji Brown Jackson, was just recently appointed on April 7, 2022. For the first time, African American women and girls get to see someone who looked like them on the highest court in the land, which has been, and still is, dominated by old white men. I, as a white man, am completely represented in all aspects of my life, from those in power looking to create legislation, to athletes that inspire. Worrying about whether or not I will see someone that looks like me in media is something that has never crossed my mind. In the workplace, at school, or driving, I do not possess the fear of having my actions singled out solely based on the color of my skin. As a white person, I instead am in possession of an inherent, unconscious security that my actions will be judged on the content alone. This security is on the account of my white privilege. Peggy McIntosh describes white privilege as an invisible weightless knapsack that holds unearned assets that white people can count on cashing in each day. My invisible knapsack gives me feelings of security afforded to me solely based on the color of my skin and me being male. I have felt the security in my life. My first time being pulled over by an officer, I was completely unfazed. The only concern I had was whether or not I would be written a ticket, and luckily I wasn't. On the other hand, my friend, who happens to be Black, was pulled over very similarly, but his inner reactions were very different. I remember receiving worrisome texts. My friend was afraid of becoming a statistic. My fear was monetary loss, and his fear was moral danger, and justifiably so. As a young white man, believing that I held status in society simply for being a white male did not make sense to me. Thus, I did not subscribe to the idea. I was clouded by my ignorance. In Tripp Glazer and Nabina Labau's 2021 scholarly article, Confronting White Ignorance, White Psychology and Rational Self-Regulation, published in the Journal of Social Philosophy, the pair explain white ignorance and colorblindness in detail. They explain colorblindness as the idea that racism is a problem of the past that has generally been overcome, and continued discussions of race threaten to undermine racial equality. Discussions to understanding race are vital to the enhancement of a more inclusive society. Being colorblind strips others of their identity, not only their skin color, but the culture that coincides. I used to subscribe to this train of thought. If everyone is equal, then why even take into account race? Though, pure, my ideology was mistaken. Seeing people for who they are and realizing that society is in fact not truly equal is what will help us progress towards something equitable. I, a white man, am afforded privilege based on my race and gender. With privilege comes responsibility. I call on those with my intersections to make people more aware of unfair privilege and to push forward not only equality, but equity. Thank you.